Hello everyone and welcome to my channel. This is the 46th part of What If Deku Had Psychokinesis. I hope you enjoy. Link to the original story and author in the description. Chapter 46, Truth, Trials, Time and Tests. Izuku was about halfway down the hall when he suddenly remembered that he had left his head crest with Ochako. Turning on his heel, Izuku jogged back towards the entrance. The slight annoyance of going back not doing anything to the elation he still felt over the events of the evening. As he got closer to the entrance, which was just around the corner, he started picking up Ochako and Himiko's voices. The two were still talking apparently, and it seemed Himiko was prodding for an answer, but still hadn't gotten anything. To God, I'm biting one of you in the neck the next time I want some blood. I swear to God I can't deal with this shit. Wah, 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 Izuku heard Ochako mock, making him snicker. I'm so sorry we're such a distraction. Izuku chuckles to himself. Poor Toga, but she's just gonna have to wait and be surprised like everyone else. Izuku was about to turn the corner when Himiko kept going. If anyone here is distracted, it's you. You get to deal with all of Izuku's bullshit on top of trying to become a hero. Ochako laughed. It was an amused laugh, though that didn't stop the next words from making Izuku pause in place. You know what, you're not wrong. I actually like the idea of turning in early tonight too. But nope, got to make sure Deku doesn't do something silly. Hearing that kinda sucked. Ochako wasn't being hurtful and Izuku could tell she was just joking around, but looking back, Izuku had to admit he had been a little selfish to make her stay late. He tunnel-visioned on One for All so hard he didn't even think about anything else. Well, great. Now you're a jerk. Great going, Izuku thought with a sigh. Oh, the agony. Ochako let out a huge exaggerated and over-the-top sigh, fighting to hold back rolls of laughter. It's so annoying. But someone's got to look after Deku. The cost of being his friend, I guess. Maybe I should get Uraraka some mochi? That should solve this. Maybe a few packs now that I'm thinking about. Cost of being in love with that dork, you mean? No matter what, you're gonna be doing everything in your power to keep him safe. Izuku froze. What? I'm cursed, Ochako agreed. I love him, but he keeps doing things that make me want to throw him. Izuku felt the world fade away from him while his heart raced, jumping for joy while a cold dread reached up. Distraction. She said we're a distraction. Cold, heartless claws dug into the joy Izuku felt in his heart and dragged it back down into the cold depths. Reminding him that if this was true, that things between him and Ochako were about to change. And when has that ever worked out for us, the dread reminded Izuku. It's absolute agony, Toga. Why'd I fall in love with him? Why Deku? I must be cursed. Cold dread, terrified dread. The harsh words it whispered into Izuku's ear. These were easier things for Izuku to understand. The other stuff, the things that could lead to change, they were too big to try and think about. So instead, Izuku focuses on the other. What he was taking away from Ochako. Distraction, you're a distraction. Hey Izuku, Himiko's voice, soft and calm, reached out through the dark thoughts and pulled Izuku back into the world, but he was still shivering from it all. Still scared and accepting the worst possible meaning for everything. Whatcha doing here? She said I was a distraction. Izuku's words were full of anguish and loss. More tears were shed as he looked at Himiko. Himiko's expression changed to almost wild panic. Whoa, hold on a second. She hissed. That was all, fucking hell, that was all just jokes. Himiko reached out and grabbed his shoulders. Stop thinking about that shit and focus on the good news. You know that she feels the same way you. Izuku shook his head. No. No. Izuku yanked himself away from Himiko. That doesn't matter. The fuck do you mean it doesn't matter? This is what you want. You're in love with her, and she's in love with you. You win, you fucking dunce. Himiko hurried after Izuku as he walked away. Not if it means getting in the way of Uraraka's goals and dreams. Izuku was panting. It was getting hard to breathe. Himiko wanted to scream, hands on the verge of pulling chunks of her own hair out. She was joking. That doesn't mean it isn't true, Izuku reasoned. This time Himiko did scream as she made to turn around. Fuck. You know what, I'll just go get Ochako and we can. Suddenly Himiko felt herself surrounded in a green glow as Izuku's psychokinesis took hold of her. Not tightly, or harshly, but like someone had grabbed her arm to stop her from running. Her clothes pressed down on her body, stopping her from heading off. Izuku? She got a good look at his face, and winced at how hurt and how damned afraid he looked. She never thought she'd see a more miserable sight than the one she had seen at Hosa City Hospital, when he had begged her not to get Ochako before. But here she was, looking at it. You're supposed to be my friend. Fucking hell, Izuku. I am. I'm trying to help you here. By stabbing me in the back? By breaking your promise? Himiko hissed through her teeth, and looked away. Yeah. I guess I did promise you, didn't I? And friends don't break promises. Do they? Himiko frowned, but shook her head. When it didn't look like Himiko was going to run off, Izuku let her go, then turned and walked into the boys' locker room. Himiko was left standing in the middle of the hallway, mind racing. Izuku was clearly not thinking straight, because there was no way he'd just leave it like that. Or forget one very simple thing about Himiko. She's a fucking liar. Ochako hummed happily as she played with her tie and straightened out her uniform. There were still times, just like right now, where she'd give herself a good look in the mirror or her reflection in a window while she was wearing her UA school uniform. I mean, I earned the right to wear this, why shouldn't I admire it, she thought to herself with a grin. With her backpack on, Ochako checked her phone while she waited at UA's main exit. It was getting late, and she knew she and Izuku were going to want to get plenty of sleep for tomorrow. But after several minutes, he still hadn't replied to her text telling him to meet her here. Which was a little odd. There you are. Ochako jumped as Himiko came rushing down the hall, her shoes squeaking as she slid to a stop. Why the fuck are you all the way over here? Toga? While Ochako was cut off as Himiko grabbed her arm and started dragging her away. Hold on. What's going on? Fucking spent way too long looking for you. We have problems. Himiko kept pulling even as Ochako tried to get her arm free. Slow down. Toga, what the hell? What's going on? I told Deku I was going to wait at the... Himiko didn't slow but did look back at her, and Ochako could see there was obviously something wrong. Izuku heard. Ochako blinked. Deku heard? Toga, just slow down and calm down and stop pulling me, for crying out loud. Himiko spat out a curse and let Ochako go before whirling around. He heard us. Heard you, and now he's freaking the fuck out. Ha? Himiko ground her palm into her forehead, trying to work out the massive headache she had. Ochako, I'm going to need you to fucking listen. Ochako nodded. Izuku came back for that stupid crest thing you had. Ochako blinked. She opened her mouth then closed it. She blinked again. He came back, the gears were starting to turn. Yeah. He came back, and was around the corner when we were talking. When you were talking. Okay, but what were we even talking about that has Toga so freaked out? We only talked about, shh. Ochako's eye bulged and her jaw fell to the floor. Oh my fucking god. I said I was in love with Deku. I said I was in love with him. Out loud. And he heard it? Himiko saw that Ochako finally got it. That's the fucking emergency. Because remember what I said way back? He can't wrap his mind around the fact that he can be loved and shit. Well, he's dealing with that, and the fact he heard you call the whole thing a distraction. So he's in the middle of flipping the fuck out. Ochako's red cheeks started to lose their color. Distraction. Did I say that? Oh fuck, I did say that. But Deku wouldn't, he couldn't think I meant it. A joke, Ochako felt dizzy. I was joking. Himiko threw up her hands. Well, he's so fucked up with the fact you love him, he zeroed in on the worst part of the whole convo and has latched onto it. He talked about himself like he is a fucking plague to you. So you need to. Ochako rushed forward and grabbed Himiko by the shoulders. Where is he? Himiko wasn't put off by the sudden move, and without missing a beat answered, boys' locker room. And Ochako was off, sprinting down the halls, Himiko following her. This wasn't what she wanted. This wasn't how Izuku was supposed to learn about her feelings. And worst yet, her jokes had gotten mixed into the confession and taken at face value. This was beyond fucked up. This wasn't right at all. I can worry about that shit later. I need to get to Deku now and make sure he knows he's not a distraction. How could he ever think that? It made no sense to her. After everything they had been through, there was no logical reason that he'd think she seriously meant that. Remember when I told you I didn't think Izuku was ready for a confession? Well, I was right. He wasn't then, and he wasn't ready now. He didn't answer me because he couldn't answer me. Himiko's words from before rang in Ochako's head. If learning she was in love with him had shocked him to such an extent, then maybe he wasn't even in the right state to realize what he was thinking. Coming to a stop in front of the boys' locker room, Ochako glanced over at Himiko. And he's in there, right? Yeah, he walked in and then I went to go find you. Ochako was ready to camp out in front of the door, not wanting to burst in and add her seeing Izuku in a state of undress to the horrible mishmash of shit going on, but then a thought filled her with dread. Toga, how long did it take you to find me? Himiko started to answer, but stopped. Then she slammed the door open as she charged in. A beat later, the door had only just closed when Ochako heard Himiko scream, "Fuck." The door slammed back open. He's fucking gone. His shit is gone too. I told him I was waiting at the main exit, Ochako hissed out. Well, then he knew which one not to leave through, Himiko growled out. Ochako turned and ran. Because if Izuku wasn't here, then there had to only be one place he'd go. Himiko screamed after her, "Where are you going?" Where Deku is going to be. Himiko watched Ochako run off as she figured out what Ochako meant, and hoped she found him at home. Hearing the door open, Inko looked up from her seat on the couch where she and Eri were watching some cartoons. It's about time. You said you were going to be late tonight, but any later and... Izuku? Izuku didn't really walk into the room, but more stumbled in. He was sweating, and he looked pale. Dropping his backpack on the ground, he headed for his room, but Inko was up out of her seat and rushed over to him. Izuku, you look horrible, are you sick? When she reached to feel his forehead, he darted away, trying to push his way past her. Not sick. Just, Izuku stumbled for an excuse and just decided to try and get away from his mother. Which she was not having. Izuku, what happened? She stepped to block his path. You need to talk to me. Mom, please. Should I call Ochako? I'm sure she'd. No. Inko took a startled step back, not used to ever hearing Izuku raise his voice like that. Izuku blinked and seemed to realize what he had just done. Please, don't do that. Just, leave it alone. Inko wasn't mad that Izuku had yelled at her, she was worried. Something had happened. But Izuku had taken advantage of her shocked state to make it past her and slip into the bathroom. By the time Inko had her hand raised to knock on the door, the sound of running water filtered into the hall. Frowning, Inko crossed her arms and walked back into the living room. Sitting back down, she tried to think about what could have happened, especially since Izuku didn't want Ochako involved in this. Eri reached over and tugged at her sleeve. What's wrong with Izuku? Inko reached over and ran her hand over the girl's hair. I don't know, sweetie. Izuku had been in the shower a long time now. That whole time, Inko had her mind racing. Then, with a grunt, she got off the couch, her mind made up. Something had gone very wrong tonight, and despite her son's pleading that she leave this alone, she would not. Picking up her phone, she was about to start dialing when there was a knocking at the door. Harsh, hurried raps that you don't hear this late at night unless someone thought there was an emergency. Putting her phone down, Inko hurried to answer. Opening the door, she found Ochako, disheveled and gasping for breath. Is Deku here? It looked like she had run all the way here from school. Pulling her inside, Inko led her to the couch. Sit. I'll get you something to drink. Inko saw Ochako eyes darting around. Her head on a swivel, she was looking everywhere. He's taking a shower, Inko clarified for her. Ochako nodded and let out a shuddering breath. He's here. Good. Ochako collapsed into the couch while Inko went to get her a glass of water. Did you two have a fight? Eri asked, looking up at Ochako with worried wonder. The little girl thought it was impossible for the two to fight. Inko came back in, a cup of water in hand. That's what I'm wondering too. Izuku was very insistent that I not call you tonight. When Ochako winced, Inko frowned. So something did happen between you. Ochako sipped at the water with a frown. Fighting is bad, Eri admonished, friends shouldn't fight. Inko quietly hushed Eri, while Ochako shook her head. We didn't, it wasn't a fight. Oh, Inko sat down next to her. Then what happened? I don't think I've seen Izuku that upset in a long time. Ochako gripped the cup in her hands tightly. He overheard me and Toga talking about things, and it sounds like he got the wrong idea. At least that's what Toga thinks. I think it might be something else. Inko scratched at her hair. And what could he have overheard that would get him into such a state? When Inko looked back at Ochako, she noticed the way she was fidgeting around. How her face had a little more pink to it, how she was having some trouble looking her in the eye. Oh. Inko gasped, a hand covering her mouth. He heard you talking about that? Ochako nodded. And while he heard that, he might have heard me joking with Toga about how distracting he is, and took it the wrong way. Inko sighed. Oh dear, that boy tends to assume the worst, though with how he's been treated by so many people. Ochako agreed. Silently, she just hoped that Izuku would give her a chance to explain things. I hope he'll listen to me. The sound of a door opening stopped Ochako's thoughts in their tracks. She turned to see Izuku, a damp towel draped over his head, emerge from the bathroom in a plain white shirt and some shorts. He was too busy harshly drying his hair to notice that there was someone watching him. After a few more overly violent rubs, Izuku pulled the towel from his head. The bags under his eyes were still there, and the normal light of life in his eyes was missing, shimmering emeralds now dull and dark. His skin looked taut and pale, a stark contrast to the steam escaping the bathroom and wafting off his now cooling hair. Clearly, whatever relief he had hoped to get from the hot shower hadn't happened. He still looked despondent, lost, and just plain miserable. Then he turned, ready to walk into his room and just hope some sleep would smother all the horrible feelings he was dealing with. He only got one step before he realized that Ochako was right in front of him. Sitting right there, on the living room couch next to his mother and Eri. She had most certainly not been there earlier. She wasn't supposed to be here at all. But she was. Ochako was right there. Which meant he needed to be anywhere else but where he was. He pivoted, but Ochako read him. She saw the terror and fear cross his face. Saw his eyes go for the door. She leapt over the couch and rushed him. Her hand was around his wrist before he could take another step. All 5 of her fingers pressed down, and Izuku was weightless. Ochako moved on instinct. She pushed Izuku down the hall, her tired legs propelling her until she pushed him right through his open bedroom door. Kicking her leg back, she hooked the door with her foot and closed it behind her. You are Uraraka? What are you doing here? Izuku stammered out. Ochako just gave him a leveled look while she let him float in the middle of the room. Deku, she was about to touch her fingers together. I'm going to drop you now. You're not going to try and run. Izuku looked away, but a growl from Ochako made him turn back and nod. When Ochako tapped her fingers together, Izuku's feet were back on solid ground. Almost immediately he decided that he needed to get her out of his room and home. So, it's, pretty late. I'm sure you're tired after. Deku. Izuku flinched but tried to power through. Oh, sorry, I ended up leaving so abruptly. I guess I was. Toga told me everything. She told me you overheard all of it. Izuku's jaw snapped shut and his legs started to give out. He stumbled back before he sat down on the bed. Ochako took a step to follow after him, and was startled when he flinched away. It was like looking back in time for her. Like looking at Izuku from over a year ago, timid, skidding, scared. I'm sorry. Ochako shook her head. Deku, I'm not mad at you. It's not your. I'm sorry for everything. Izuku had pulled his knees up, so he could wrap his arms around and press his forehead against them, hiding his face and making sure he couldn't look at Ochako. Or let her look at him. Ochako frowned. Everything? Ochako sat down next to Izuku, the shift in the bed making him flinch. You don't think I meant anything I was saying, right? I was joking around with Toga. She paused, before clarifying. All that distraction stuff, none of it was serious. For a second, she had thought to just encompass everything that was said. But to deny everything, to deny she had said she loved him, that stuck in her throat, tasting of bile and bitterness. It doesn't make it untrue. Deku, you can't really think that? Izuku was upset, Ochako knew this. He was scared and not thinking like he normally would. Otherwise, she knew he wouldn't be so focused on this. Which just left her with one singular possibility. Putting together everything Himiko had told her, even from their talk at Hoso City Hospital, Ochako had a pretty good idea of what was really going on. It was just navigating this first issue that was tricky. Izuku heard something he wasn't ready to hear, so instead of focusing on that, the part that scared him, he latched onto something else, something he could understand, from all the experience he had growing up. If Ochako was going to get to the root of this whole distraction thing needs to be nipped in the bud. But she doubted words would be that effective now. If he was taking a joke at face value, words meant nothing. He'd need to be shown through action, not words. I'm sorry, Izuku repeated, face still buried. You could have been home resting or studying. But instead you were. The bed shifted as Ochako got up. Maybe she was leaving. Izuku hoped that was the case. Better she get home to rest than waste any more time here with him. But Izuku never heard his door open. Never heard her leave. Had he missed it? Then a soft and quiet sound caught his ear. A soft rustling, like fabric rubbing against fabric. Something was tossed on the bed. Deku, Ochako's voice was soft, but there was a firmness to it. She was set on something. Look at me. Izuku kept his face buried. Deku, her voice was the same, but now Izuku felt her hands gently cupping his face. Look at me. At first he didn't move, but Ochako didn't move her hands. Finally, Izuku lifted his head up, before he jerked to a stop and his eyes went wide. Immediately he tried to turn away, but Ochako held him in place. Deku, don't turn away. Ochako kept Izuku's face, facing her. She had removed her school blazer, rolled up her sleeves almost to her shoulders and had untucked her shirt while also unbuttoning the bottom half of it, so her stomach was visible. Look at me, Deku. Do you honestly think I'd be where I am now if you were a distraction? Ochako moved her hands so they were cupping Izuku along his jaw and chin, holding him gently. We started this together. We worked hard, together. You're so focused on this night because I stayed late to help you, because of course I'd stay to help you. Deku, I can't count how many times you've helped me. While we were training, when I was in danger at the USJ. The same way I've helped you when you're training, the same way I came when you were in danger. Because that's what we do, Deku. We help each other. If you fall, I'm there to pick you up. If I fall, you're there for me. I'm here, right now, because of you. Just like you're here now because of me. We've come so far because we're in this together. That is not a distraction. And you know this, Deku. Because you know I'd never let something distract me. Just like you'd never let something distract you. We are not distractions. Ochako watched Izuku's eyes. They darted over her. Not in some lecherous manner, there was no ill intent or lust. Izuku's eyes were looking at her, seeing her. Seeing her commitment to herself, to her family, and to their friendship. She watched as some of the light came back to them, before they drifted up and looked into her own eyes. Deku, everything I just said, you know. I know you do. So please, no more saying you're sorry. Just tell me what's really going on. While Ochako rebuttoned her shirt and took a seat next to Izuku again, said boy was trying to decide what to do. Since lying was out. Because any excuse he could come up with by lying would be dashed since Ochako would know it was a lie, or because it would be incredibly disrespectful to her. Or some combination of the two. So, lying was definitely out. So that just left the truth, and God did that scare him. Then Ochako put her hand on his, and he was scared at just how nice it felt. Her hand on his. He loved her. And now he knew she loved him. On top of that, one of his fears at what that could mean was now dashed on the rocks. Whatever was between them, past, present and future, would never become a distraction. So, what was left that had him so afraid? I'm afraid of what you're, Izuku frowned. Saying out loud that Ochako loved him, to her, felt wrong. Because he had overheard it, she hadn't told him. Of what I overheard you say could mean, about us. Why are you afraid of that? Are you not happy that I, you know? Izuku blushed. When I heard you say that, I thought my heart was going to leap out of my chest, but then it hit me, this, what we have now, could be gone. Gone? One way or another, if I acknowledged it, or you found out I knew, it would mean things would change between us. And when I thought about that, I needed a reason to pretend like I hadn't heard you. To not think about it. It was easier to focus on the other things you said, and make that the issue. Easier to hide behind that problem than face the one I really didn't want to think about. That what we have, could end up changing. Ochako frowned. But Deku, change doesn't have to be bad. Izuku sighed, a tinge of bitterness in his voice. I have bad luck with change when it comes to friends. I'm not Bakugou. I know that. Believe me, I know that, Izuku sighed. Doesn't mean it's not something I think about when I think about change. Deku. Uraraka, I can't put into words how much I cherish what we have. I don't want to lose it. Ochako leaned forward as she thought about her reply. I get that change can be scary. But, don't you think it can also be wonderful? To have what we share grow into something more? I do, Izuku snapped his mouth shut. He had answered far too quickly, making himself blush. I've thought about it, a lot actually. Izuku started wringing his hands together. It just seemed so far-fetched and crazy. Does it still seem crazy? The way Ochako asked the question made Izuku look at her. She was smiling at him. A soft, gentle smile. Calming. Kind. Loving. Her eyes seemed to twinkle like the stars she was so in love with, and her cheeks, those round pink cheeks, looked extra rosy. Was the idea that there was something more he could share with her crazy? After everything, after learning that he could be loved, and then hearing the words from Ochako herself. No, it wasn't crazy at all. Could he tell her? Yes. Should he tell her? Yes. Did he want to tell her? You wouldn't be asking. It was still so scary, though. Sometimes life's scary, even the good parts. This was so different from anything he'd ever thought he'd do. When has that stopped you before? Different got you into UA. He didn't know what to do. Yes, you do. Can you date and train to be a hero? Those web searches had some examples. Heck, Ida's family is the best one. He wanted to. Then do it. Izuku took a breath, steadying himself. He took another and turned to face Ochako. Uraraka, I. Ochako reached up and put her hand in front of his mouth, shushing him and shaking her head. Deku, stop. Izuku almost tripped out of the bed, utterly confused. Ochako smiled and shook her head. Deku, you just had some big internal conflict to psych yourself up, didn't you? You were making all kinds of faces. When Izuku winced, Ochako took his hands into hers. Deku, I want to ask you. Whatever you were about to say, are you 100% sure you can say it? Izuku started to open his mouth, but Ochako kept going, no regrets, no second guessing. You have to be completely and absolutely certain. Because Deku. I think I deserve to hear what you want to say, only when you're sure you want to say it. Izuku sat silently contemplating that. It was a fair thing for Ochako to ask. She more than deserved that kind of respect. I'm not sure. I want to say, he trailed off when Ochako shook her head. Don't force an answer, Deku. If you need time, it's okay. Izuku frowned. While waiting was respectful to Ochako, he wasn't sure it was fair. I want to give you an answer, since I heard. Ochako hummed to herself. Don't feel like you have to, just because you heard something. I don't mind waiting, Deku. Honestly. I'd rather tell you how I feel myself directly. Not by you overhearing around a corner. Ochako sighed, scratching at her hair. This feels weird. But maybe, there was no pretending it hadn't happened, but let's say what you heard didn't count. So, no pressure on either side. Izuku caught on to what she meant. She wasn't pretending nothing happened, but she was asking for a do-over. A chance to tell him directly she loved him. Oh. That got a blush to spread over Izuku's whole face. Ochako watched some smoke puff out of Izuku's nose and knew he got the answer. She chuckled and blushed. It was a wonderful sound to Izuku. And those bright pink cheeks, so beautiful. Maybe it was the promise of hearing those words again, and getting to see the beautiful girl in front of him saying it, but Izuku found his courage, and with mind made up, with some ghostly encouragement from the rest, his heart cheering him on, Izuku finally decided, our term finals. Ha! Ochako's head tilted as she looked at Izuku, a little confused. What about our finals? I want to make sure I have myself figured out before you tell me. I think it's only fair you hear what I have to say before you have to say it again. And I'll be ready after our finals. After finals? I'll have a proper answer for you after we take care of our business. There'll be a break before our summer training. I'll make sure I have an answer for you then. I'll have it figured out. So, give me a chance to say what I want to say before you have your do-over. Ochako thought about that. After finals was not that far off. She had been honest that she was willing to wait, but at the same time, she'd be lying if she said she didn't want to hear it from Izuku. And if he wanted to take the initiative, well, she wasn't going to say no. She liked the idea of being confessed to. Okay, Deku, after finals. Ochako didn't add before summer training, not wanting to trap Izuku into anything. Let's ace these exams, and then I'll be waiting for you. Izuku nodded. You know, Deku, I think, us being able to acknowledge that there's something personal here, while also making sure we're able to prioritize the things we have to do, making sure our responsibilities are taken care of, is the most mature thing we can do. Izuku agreed, giving her a shaky smile. So, we're all good then? Izuku pondered for a second before he nodded. I think I'm good. It's still scary, but sometimes the scary stuff is worth it, in the end. That answer made Ochako beam happily. Then Izuku tapped his chin. Do you mind if I ask you something, Uraraka? Sure. Go ahead. Why were you talking so openly with Toga about all that? Ochako blinked, then started to laugh nervously. Oh, well you see, she's known how I've felt for a while now. Izuku's jaw dropped. She's known? Since Hosu? Yeah. Oh my god. Izuku clutched his now burning face. Uhu, is that why she's been, oh god. What? Ochako was confused. It looked like something had just clicked for Izuku and Ochako was trying to catch up. So, remember how we were all recovering at Hosu City Hospital for a while? Yeah. Izuku was blushing like mad. Well, Toga might have learned a little more than what I told you and all might about, Ochako raised an eyebrow, and since then she's been, really trying to get me to, you know. Ochako's eyes went wide. You too? Izuku whirled around to face and point at Ochako while she was pointing at him. Has she been? Ochako's shocked face turned into cackling glee as she fell backwards. She's been playing both sides to try and get us to hook up. Oh, Ochako put a hand over her mouth to try and stifle the laugh. I think I have to throw her into orbit now. While Ochako laughed, Izuku replayed the past couple of months. He knew that all the teasing Himiko did to him was her way of flirting, since she had openly admitted she was in love with him. But after Hosu she had started teasing and hanging onto Ochako too, so could that mean that? Uraraka. Ochako was able to squeak out a, yeah? Izuku wanted to handle this delicately. So, Toga's teasing. That she does to me, she, told me the reason why she does it, Ochako's laughter calmed, and, she's been doing the same to you. Has she told you why? Well, if it's all coming out. Yeah, she's told me. Izuku looked a little startled, but not all that surprised. Himiko did seem like the kind of person that had enough love in her heart for more than one. She also told me that she confessed to you. That did surprise Izuku. And that she kissed you. Slightly panicked, Izuku started to try and explain, but Ochako held up a hand. Don't worry, Deku. It's okay. She explained things before and I'm not mad, maybe a little jealous. Izuku chirped at that. Ochako licked her lips, she also kissed me, you know. After she confessed. Deku? Izuku had zoned out the moment he had heard that Himiko had kissed Ochako. It was suddenly all he could think about. Himiko, gently cupping Ochako's cheeks as she leaned in and pressed her lips against Ochako. Ochako coughed into her hand, ahem, breaking Izuku out of his daydream. Izuku blinked then bashfully pulled at his collar. Ochako chuckled, amused at the sight. Just so you know, Deku, whatever you're thinking about is way off. Ha? I can see on your face how you think it played out. Is she cupping my face and giving me a nice little peck here? Ochako tapped her lips playfully. When Izuku nodded, Ochako just smiled. She was gentle with you, Deku. Me? She kissed me like how you really imagine Toga would kiss someone. Ochako watched as Izuku blinked. Took a second to think about that, then promptly fell over and overheated. Face red and clouds of smoke puffing out of his mouth. It was actually hilarious, and more than a little cute. Did Izuku manage to squeak out, did she put her tongue in? Izuku's overheated brain made him ask that. Normally, he'd never dream of asking such a personal question. But if anything, this night was far from normal. It was Ochako's turn to go a little red, but licking her lips, she nodded. Yeah, she did. Ochako tried to sound smug about it. It wasn't the only thing she did, but no reason to tell Deku all that. Did you kiss her back? I did. Ochako was rewarded with another Izuku short circuit. She had to admit, seeing him all flustered and maybe even turned on, was almost unbearably cute. Izuku's breath was coming out hot as he tried to keep all the scenes playing out in his head from giving him a heatstroke and a massive nosebleed. Tongues, Toga used her tongue while she was kissing Uraraka, and Uraraka kissed back. Did that mean she had her tongue in Toga's mouth too? She said she kissed back, so that must mean. Izuku gripped the bedsheets and with smoke still puffing out asked. Do you like those kinds of kisses, Uraraka? Izuku wasn't sure he meant to ask that, but he did. Maybe he was too overheated to think straight, but this seemed like an important question to ask for later. Now it was Ochako's turn to be the one totally red-faced. Her hands slapped against her cheeks as she accidentally floated herself in embarrassment. But even as her butt hit the ceiling, she found herself nodding. I did, and she looked down at Izuku as she said the last part. It might be fun to kiss like that again. Neither of them were coherent after that for several minutes. When Izuku and Ochako both left his room, they found Inko and Eri both sitting on the couch waiting for them. Inko was clearly waiting for some news or sign. Izuku quickly explained that everything was fine and that for the time being, they were going to take care of the finals. And then, Izuku scratched his neck as he said the next bit, they'd get the rest squared away after he got himself figured out. Inko's eyes drifted to Ochako, and the other girl flashed her a smile. So things were good. Well, I think I should be getting home. It's late, Anne. Of course it's late. Far too late for you to get home at any decent time. Now, unless there's anything you need from home? Inko asked, which Ochako shook her head, since she had everything she needed for the tests either at school or her bag. Then Izuku, go pull out the spare futon we bought for Ochako. I knew making sure you had some spare clothes here was going to pay off. At least this way you'll both get a good night's sleep before all your tests. Himiko paced back and forth at UA's front gate while more and more students filed in. She hadn't heard anything after she had sent Ochako after Izuku. She was nervous, not a normal feeling for her. Where the hell are they? If something had happened, I'm sure at least Ochako would have texted me. Himiko covered her face with her hands as she started to spiral into another crisis. I should have fucking just left with her. Why now, at all times, did I decide to play by the fucking rules and stay on campus? What the fuck is wrong with? Toga, are you okay? Izuku glanced over at Ochako, who was also giving the girl a worried look. You're looking a little stressed there. At this point Himiko was banging her head against a wall. No, I'm not fucking okay. I'm standing here waiting for you two to show up so I can finally learn what the fuck happened after. Himiko paused mid-bash, lowered her hands and turned to look at Izuku and Ochako. You're both here. Izuku smiled. Hello. Ochako waved. Yo. There was a brief pause before Himiko screamed and lunged for their throats. After giving the two of them a good throttling, Himiko pulled back and gave them a thorough look-over. Neither was distressed. In fact, both had huge smiles as they laughed off her attack. They were acting normal. Completely and utterly normal. Which after everything that had happened last night, was not fucking normal. So, Himiko started digging. What's the deal? Her hands held up, fingers twitching as she begged for the details. If she didn't get the juicy gossip, she was gonna start drooling. Are you two like, she wiggled her eyebrows, you know? Both flushed before Izuku waved his hands around in a small panic. Toga. No. Himiko's hands were grabbing her hair, threatening to pull out her buns, but Ochako cut her off. Just calm down and listen before you jump the gun, alright? Izuku nodded. She's right, Toga. Uraraka and we wanted to talk to you and explain the situation. Since, Izuku scratched at his neck, you've been, pretty involved with us, on both sides. Himiko raised an eyebrow, glancing over at Ochako who was looking at Izuku with no small amount of pride. Okay. So you know that I've been. Himiko wasn't sure what a nice diplomatic way to phrase what she had been doing. Ochako, though, filled in, trying to hook us up. Izuku, blushing but also nodding, pointed at Ochako. Yeah, that, and other things. Other things? What other? Oh. Himiko pointed at Ochako, who nodded, then looked over at Izuku. Izuku blushed and fidgeted. The, flirting makes sense now. Well, alrighty then. Seems like they did talk then. It was a relief to Himiko to at least see that neither Izuku or Ochako seemed fazed by this info, though having a night to sleep on it might have helped. And seeing Izuku still get flustered over the topic was super cute. All good things, since secrets between friends weren't very healthy, but none of this answered any of her questions. So, what's the deal then? Izuku straightened himself out. Right. So firstly, I wanted to apologize to you, Toga. Last night I put you in a really unfair position. Izuku looked down, ashamed. Saying that, making you feel like, that trying to help me meant betraying our friendship. I had no right to say that. Ever since we met, you've been trying to help me. To be there for me. And last night I all but spat in your face. Toga, Himiko held up a hand. Ochako, just curious here, but I'm guessing that last night there were a lot of I'm sorry from this dense nut. Ochako smiled, but rubbed at her brow like she was massaging a headache. There were. Did you tell him to stop? I did. Good. Izuku, Himiko's sudden pivot back to him made him straighten up. I wouldn't have been waiting here, for you guys to show up, if I wasn't still your good serial killing buddy. Ex-serial killing buddy, Ochako corrected her. That is entirely up to Baku bitch, but that's besides the point. The grin on Himiko's face made Izuku gulp nervously while Ochako flashed her a discreet thumbs up. I'm still your ride or die chick. You said some shit. I don't really care since I know who you really are. I've been stabbed in the back by people I thought I could trust. I can actually show you the scars if you want. That's not you. So let's do us both a favor here. I know you're sorry, so let's just skip over all the words, that by the sound of things Ochako over there is also tired of hearing. Ochako snickered, and let's get to the part where you two tell me what in the hell happened last night? Because I'm dying right now, and if we're at some kind of let's pretend nothing happened phase, I'm legitimately going to freak the fuck out. No one's pretending that last night didn't happen. The fact it was Izuku who said that made Himiko look at him, a little startled. But, Ochako continued, for right now, we think it's best to focus on our finals first. So right now, things are on hold. Why? Himiko almost wailed, but Ochako kept going. Because just because you know something, it's different than getting a chance to tell someone. And getting a chance to hear someone tell you something, Ochako explained. I deserve a chance to actually, she blushed as she kept going, to actually tell Deku how I feel. Face to face. Not from around a corner. And I deserve to hear how Deku feels, when he doesn't feel obligated to give me an immediate answer. And I deserve the time to make sure I can give Uraraka an answer, but it needs to be one I'm focused on entirely. So no late night freakouts pushing me to say something or impending super important tests to distract me. So we both agreed that, after our final exams, that I would be the one to bring the subject back up. Himiko crossed her arms as she went over all that. It wasn't exactly what she had been hoping would happen, but, in the long term this might be the best thing for them. You're saying that you'll be the one to bring the subject up again? Himiko asked, making sure she had Izuku's full attention. The poor greenette, flushed red and fidgeting around, was still able to hold her eye long enough and nod. And after the final exams. Does that mean? Toga, Ochako huffed with a smile, Deku told me he'd have an answer for me after we take our finals. That's good enough for me. Okay? Himiko held up her hands, conceding and moving on, so you two are both willing to just wait. You're just going to sit on this, when you both. It's a matter of respect, Toga, Izuku explained gently. To each other and ourselves. I think, us being able to acknowledge that there's something personal there, while also making sure we're able to prioritize the things we have to do, making sure our responsibilities are taken care of, is the most mature thing we can do.
Exactly, Ochako said with a nod. Himiko raised an eyebrow, smirking. So you're totally copying something Ochako said, aren't you? Izuku laughed nervously.
Little bit.
You too, you're both way stronger than I gave you both credit for. No chance in hell I'd be willing to sit on something like this. Ochako rolled her eyes. It's called being responsible, Toga.
Black.
No thanks. I'm a more, in the moment, kind of girl.
No kidding, Izuku and Ochako stereoed.
Oi. With things explained, the three friends headed to class. As they walked, Himiko tugged on Ochako's sleeve, slowing her down enough so they were now a few steps behind Izuku so she could talk quietly as they walked.
So? You really okay with this?
Ochako nodded. Deku might, no. But since I haven't told him, it doesn't count. It's just like we said, Toga. Deku has some things he needs to figure out. I'm willing to wait.
To give him the time he needs to figure out what he's going to say to me.
Himiko shook her head. Are you sure you got trained by Miruko? She doesn't seem like the kind of person to install patience. Ochako glanced over to make sure Izuku wasn't looking before she flipped Himiko the finger. I was trained by Gunhead too, bitch. What about All Might? I know what I said. Himiko chuckled. And Izuku, he didn't say anything to you, and now you have to wait to hear how he feels. Must be nerve-wracking, huh?
Ochako shrugged.
I guess I'm more nervous about what he'll say than how he really feels.
Himiko cocked her head to the side, an eyebrow raised as she picked up on some of the very specific wording of what Ochako had just said.
Hold the phone. Don't, me. Himiko poked her. What the hell do you mean you're more nervous about what he'll say than how he feels? It sounds like you already know something. Ochako smiled. That big toothy smile that just beamed confidence like the sun was bright. It was Ochako's special, I'm the boss / I'm fucking adorable and you know it's smile.
And considering the clusterfuck the last few hours had been, it was not the smile she should have. The Gravity Girl's cheeks were also getting a nice rosy shade to them.
What the hell is going on here? Ochako, still smiling and blushing, very nonchalantly took a step back and fixed up her tie. I might already have everything figured out. Himiko wanted to tear out her hair. Are you going to actually say something that makes sense? Or am I going to have to stab you before you take your first test?
Ochako finished fixing her tie, and then started examining her nails.
After months of dealing with Himiko, it was fun to be on the attack. I mean, isn't it obvious? Bitch, if you don't. I'm talking about Deku. Izuku?
Yup. The gears in Himiko's head were whirling away, until they ground to a halt.
Wait one goddamned fucking second. You are not going to stand there and tell me. I never told you he almost kissed me after that fancy dinner we went to, did I? Ochako turned around and continued on to class.
Her smug smile got wider as Himiko screeched behind her, what? On the third day, with the last paper turned in, Class 1A had finished their written exams.
Several students cheered or sighed in relief. It's over. Thank God.
Thanks a lot, Yayarozu, all that studying at your place helped a bunch.
Momo fidgeted as Kyuka came over to thank her. Not at all. You're already brilliant, of course. Himiko lay down on her desk. No more tests ever again. Denki laughed. Except at the end of next term, and then there's years 2 and 3. Thunk. A knife whirled by his head and got stuck in the wall. No more tests ever again, Himiko repeated blissfully. Where does she hide those? It's like Midoriya's notebook. Best not to question it. Everyone. Tenya moved to the front of the class.
With the completion of our written exams, we now only have our practicals tomorrow. I suggest that after our lunch period we spend the later part of the day preparing ourselves for the challenges to come. I vote we all take a nap, Himiko countered. Which got several laughs. Tenya adjusted his glasses. To ensure that we are prepared both mentally and physically, a good rested body and mind is an excellent suggestion. I'm proud to see you are taking this seriously. Himiko blinked rapidly. Wait, what just happened? I think he just made you the class suck-up, Mina snickered. Fucking kill me, Tenya's learning. Himiko's death was postponed as the lunch bell rang. While the class got up to go have their lunch, Izuku paused at the door before turning to look at his friends. I have something I need to take care of first. Meet you all in the cafeteria. All Might smiled when Izuku walked into his office. Ah, young Midoriya. What can I do for you? I thought after all those tests you'd be heading home right away. I still have memories of my old test I took here, ha 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 ha. Izuku nervously nodded while he closed the door behind him. They weren't that bad. That's good to hear. It means you came prepared. So, what can I do for you? Izuku was rubbing his neck. I came to ask for your advice. All Might held up a finger. Now, young Midoriya. I can't go giving you any hints on what the practical test will be like tomorrow. Izuku waved his hands around. What? No, not that. That's not what I wanted to ask you about. All Might laughed. I was only joking. No need to worry. So? What do you want to ask me? Izuku gulped, but he was here. So there was no going back. Do you have any advice about, love? All Might's head shot up, while a spew of blood rocketed out of his mouth as he coughed in shock. Love? Of all the things All Might was prepared to talk about with Izuku, this wasn't one of them. Young Midoriya, that topic, that is to say, he coughed into his hand, trying to get himself under control. Don't you think that kind of topic would be better discussed? All Might was about to say father, but considering that the relationship between the two were not the greatest, then pivoted to bring up Inko, with your mother? Izuku was fidgeting around, clearly uncomfortable, but it spoke volumes that he had even come here and brought up the topic at all. All Might knew this was serious for the boy. I mean, we did, talk, some, about, stuff. Young Midoriya, this isn't you needing to learn about the birds and the bees, right? Izuku's initial nervousness vanished almost instantly, replaced with an exasperated annoyance. Izuku threw up his hands. No. Why does everyone just assume I don't know about sex? Just because it's not the first thing on my mind. I know what sex is. And protection and all that stuff. Izuku rubbed his brow and kept going, still clearly annoyed, and I'm not asking about having sex with Uraraka. I'm asking for advice about if I should tell her I love her. If it's okay to date her. Izuku then blinked and realized he said a lot of that out loud and maybe not in the best way. He had also just told All Might who he was in love with and he hadn't been 100% sure he was going to do that from the start. Eep. All Might nodded sagely. Now I understand. Finally figured it out, huh? Izuku looked at All Might funnily and the hero just explained, young Midoriya. You're not exactly subtle. Izuku groaned but decided not to dwell on that. Because thinking of who else might know about his feelings was not something he wanted to focus on. Clearing his throat, Izuku ultimately decided he was here, so he should just ask what he needed to ask. The fact that All Might knew who he was talking about might just make things easier. All Might, I wanted to, even when he had decided he was going to do this, it was still hard. I wanted to ask for your advice about love. About being a hero and being in love. Izuku held up a clenched fist, looking at it. About having one for all and being in love. Izuku was so focused now on getting his questions out, that he didn't notice All Might's mood darken. You are a hero, and you held one for all for decades.
Did you ever want to be with someone? Did you ever fall in love or want to? Izuku sighed. Because I want to. For so long I didn't think things like love or dating were possible for me. Taking a girl to a carnival. Going on the Ferris wheel while sharing a crepe. Those kinds of things seemed more unrealistic than me getting into UA. But things happened. I'll think those dreams might be something I could actually have. I learned that how I view myself isn't how others view me. The words Ochako said those nights ago, the words he should have focused on, rang in his ears. And even Himiko's talk with him in the hospital. Those events were fresh in Izuku's mind as he kept talking. It's all made me want to tell Uraraka how I feel. I want to tell her that I love her, that I think I've loved her for a while now but didn't know it. But with Izuku spread out his hands, everything that's going on, is it alright? Our studies, then when we go pro, on top of me having one for all and knowing that I'll eventually have to deal with all for one. Izuku sighed. I guess, to be the me I'm expected to be, does that mean I have to give up on the me I want to be, the me that's with her? If Izuku had been paying attention, he would have seen the conflict that passed over All Might's face. As Tashinori, he had made bets and joked with the boy's mother about how long it would be until Izuku and Ochako ended up together. As his and Ochako's teacher and mentor, the idea that the two had found a connection with each other, had formed a bond that was now blossoming into something new, warmed his heart. But as a hero and previous wielder of One for All, a very different feeling filled him. A cold fear that threatened to stop him from breathing. He wanted to encourage Izuku. He wanted to encourage Ochako as well. He wanted to warn them too. Because as horrible as it was to say, he had seen where the path Izuku wanted to tread ended. Or could end. All Might frowned and pressed his hands together before motioning towards the empty sofa. Young Midoriya, have a seat. Oh, this might not be good. Izuku gulped nervously as he sat down, watching as All Might worked to choose his words carefully. Young Midoriya. You came here to ask for my advice. Because you believe I have experience in this. That because I also held One for All, our unique similarities could help you make a decision. Well, you're not wrong, but what I have to give you is neither the answer I think you wanted to hear nor one I think I ever wanted you to discover. But I think you need to hear it. All Might could see Izuku was confused, which made sense. All Might was beating around the bush. I haven't spoken to you much about my predecessor, have I? You mentioned something about her cape? How mine reminded you of hers. All Might chucked. I did. Shimura Nana. That was her name. She was the seventh wielder of One for All and my master. She was a teacher, a hero, a constant thorn in All for One's side. All Might took a breath. She was also a wife and a mother. Izuku watched All Might, and the pain on the hero's face made it clear that whatever was coming was going to be painful. All for One found Nana's husband and killed him. Oh. It was such a weak response, but it was the only thing Izuku's body let him say. Izuku also wasn't sure what he really could say to that. At least at first. With the horrible idea that one of the previous wielders of One for All lost someone so dear to them, something else then sprung up in Izuku's head. What happened to her child? Izuku felt his stomach twist at what the answer could be. It was making him sick. Her son lived, but All Might wrung his hands together. She ultimately gave him up. Gave him up? What did that mean? Nana realized that to continue the fight against All for One she couldn't be a hero and a mother at the same time. So she made the decision to give her son up. She wanted him to have a chance at a normal life. Something he wouldn't have with her. She was so adamant about this, she forbade myself or Gran Torino from ever having any contact with him. All Might sighed. In the end, Nana made the choice to sacrifice her personal life and love so she could dedicate her all to the fight against All for One. By standing up to him, and passing on everything she knew to the next in line. I saw what she lost, and the effect it had on her. She was the one that started the smile, you know. No matter how scary it gets, you must always wear a smile that says, I'm fine.
All Might puffed up momentarily, showing off that giant smile he was so well known for, before he shrunk back down.
She always smiled. Even during the worst times. There were times
I'd see her smiling, but it felt like she was smiling to hide her own pain.
Losing her husband and her son.
Izuku recalled something All Might had said to him, when they had first met.
Like you told me that your smile hides a lot of fear?
All Might huffed out a mirthless chuckle.
I suppose you're right.
He ran his hand through his hair.
After that,
I suppose I learned from Nana's mistakes.
I never pursued any meaningful romantic relationships.
Not saying there weren't flings, but those were purely physical.
I worked very hard to keep emotional connections to a bare minimum.
Seeing what happened to Nana, I was terrified of people doing it because they were close to me, and I suppose I was afraid of feeling the same pain she went through.
There was something so sad about that.
All Might, the symbol of peace.
Adored by the people around the world. You chose to live alone?
All Might leaned back, glancing out the window.
I dedicated my life to becoming the pillar I am now. So much time out and about, it wasn't like I was sitting at home, alone.
I also do have friends. When he looked back, he saw the doubt on Izuku's face, but very few.
And of course, only the bare minimum, no, the real me, you could say. Izuku sat and thought about that.
Before him were two stories, centered around two people who had dedicated their lives to being heroes. One had lost everything and the other had chosen to have nothing. It was just so sad, and felt so wrong.
All Might could see the distress on Izuku's face. I know this isn't what you hoped to hear. But I can only give you what I know.
Unfortunately, in my experience, he shrugged, sometimes the sacrifices hurt less than the loss. Izuku considered his next words carefully, because he had only come at the issue from one direction. There was another side to what he wanted. And while she wasn't here to ask it, Izuku still thought it was important to get an answer from All Might.
If Uraraka had come instead of me, asking you if she could date and fall in love, what would you tell her?
I know I have one for all, but you trained us both.
It was a fair question, honestly. I'd probably tell her the exact same thing.
She's chosen to stand against all for one, same as you.
So the same risks apply. So should she leave her family? It's what made her want to be a hero to begin with. She wants to make sure they live comfy, happy lives. And what about my mom and Eri?
All Might held up his hands.
I'm not telling you, either of you, to cut off your family from your lives.
In truth, family isn't something I have any experience with, so I can't offer any advice on that matter.
I simply don't know what to do. Neither am I telling you can't or shouldn't pursue a relationship with young Uraraka. Or her with you.
In the end, I can only share my experiences.
It's the same with who you tell about one for all. Ultimately, the decision is up to you. You're the future now, all I can do is try and help you the best I can.
I've made choices that I don't think you'd have made, Izuku said, recalling how he almost immediately decided that Himiko was going to be brought into the loop. Very true, when you took the mantle of one for all you started to forge your own path. You're your own person, young Midoriya. Soon after this, Izuku felt he had heard what he needed to hear, and All Might seemed like he was content with what he had said. Some awkward but friendly goodbyes were exchanged, and Izuku was at the door to leave.
Young Midoriya, Izuku turned back to look at All Might. No matter what, I will support you too. You are my protégés.
And despite the responsibilities you both have now, I want you to be happy.
Thank you, All Might. Izuku bowed and had his hand on the door, but paused one last time. All Might? Yes? Shimura's husband. Was he a professional hero too? No. He wasn't.
Walking down the hall, Izuku was deep in thought. Perhaps not since his first meeting with All Might,
had he been given such a look at the man behind the symbol. And it was more tragic than he could have ever imagined. This new knowledge put everything in a new light, such as his insistence on keeping one for all a secret even from friends. Izuku supposed from All Might's point of view, it made sense. But for Izuku, it was a struggle to wrap his mind around it. All Might didn't just choose isolation, he actively fought to maintain it. Izuku, on the other hand, had been forced into isolation for years. And now, at this point in his life, with his whole outlook on life and himself thoroughly shaken to its foundation, Izuku was certain that he would do anything to keep from being alone again. Which brought up an issue that Izuku knew he needed to address, whether to let the rest of his friends know about One for All, and whether to let his mother. His friends seemed like an almost cut and dry answer. The actual question was when would it be the appropriate time? Definitely not now, with the practical exam tomorrow. And definitely not until he gave Ochako the answer she rightly deserved. Once finals were done, Ochako was going to be his priority. But after that, it would be time to let his friends know. His mother, on the other hand, that was a messy and complicated issue that even thinking about it gave him headaches that put his worst psychokinesis accidents to shame. So that mess would get tabled for later. Maybe much later. His friends were training to be heroes. They could be prepared for the issues that came with learning about One for All. His mother? And there's the headache, ow. Yeah, that was a problem for another time. But as Izuku walked down the halls, he refocused on his talk with All Might, and what it meant for him going forward. As scary as the prospect was, even with his own insecurities gnawing at him, Izuku knew that simply going back to how things were wasn't an option. He had to address these feelings of his, and Ochako's feelings for him. He had to come to terms with the idea that it was alright to want this. And to accept, no, to embrace the idea that he was also wanted. Ochako was willing to wait for Izuku to get his own feelings in order, and Izuku planned on doing it. Because Ochako deserved to hear his feelings, deserved a proper response after he had overheard her talking with Himiko. But just because Ochako was willing to wait, didn't mean Izuku was going to make her wait long. He wasn't going to string this out. He had a responsibility to her. Because he shared those feelings, true, but it was more than that. Izuku respected Ochako too much as a person, a fellow UA student, a future hero, and as a friend to make her wait too long. Going to see All Might, Izuku had hoped for some advice, something to help make him sure he was doing the right thing. And he got it, just not in the way he had expected. Nana wasn't wrong in her choices. Neither was All Might. They did what they thought was best. But there were costs. And one of those were their smiles. Those smiles that brought joy to people, that brought relief and hope. That let those that suffer know that everything was going to be okay. They were so much more, and carried so much more weight. Hiding pain. Hiding fear. Izuku didn't want his smile to hide anything. He wanted to smile because he was showing something. He wanted to smile because he was loved. It was only a few hours after Izuku's head hit his pillow that a sound pulled him out of his relaxing sleep. A soft whimper that Izuku over the few months has trained himself to hear, even when he was asleep. Izuku's eyes fluttered open even as his body was rolling out of his bed. By the time his feet hit the floor, he was fully awake and ready to act. Eri's distressed noises usually meant she was having another nightmare, and Izuku was ready to wake her up, as well as jot down anything she remembered. Every clue was one step closer to figuring out who had been hurting her. But tonight was different. Flicking on the lights, he saw that Eri was awake and sitting up in her bed. She was also clutching her head. Eri? Izuku knelt by the bed and leaned in, looking to see what was wrong. Are you all right? What's wrong? Did she accidentally bang her head on the bottom of the frame? My horn hurts. Her horn? Izuku moved to sit on the edge of the bed and pulled Eri next to him. Gently, he moved her hands aside so he could get a better look. He didn't see any red marks or bruising, so it didn't look like she had bumped it against anything. Running his fingers around the horn, he also didn't feel any swelling or heat from the skin. Izuku pondered, nothing looks wrong, although.
Looking at Eri for a moment, Izuku carefully put his hand next to her horn. Humming to himself, Izuku reached out, pulled his phone over, and started flipping through pictures, looking for ones that had Eri in them.
Just to confirm something.
Looking over the pictures, Izuku quickly confirmed, "Your horn is bigger." Now that he was paying attention to it, in some of the first pictures he had of Eri, her horn was a little nub. But scrolling through the more recent ones, it was clear it had been growing gradually ever since. Now, it almost reached from the bottom of his palm to his pinky.
Definitely bigger than a few days ago, by an inch or two. Sit right here, Eri. I'm going to go get you something.
Getting up, Izuku went to the bathroom and began rummaging through some cabinets. As he did, out of the corner of his eye, he saw the lights come on in his mother's room. By the time he heard footsteps, he had found what he was looking for.
Izuku? What's going on? Himiko frowned.
She could hear the whimpers coming from Izuku's room.
Eri's horn is hurting her. Her horn? Yeah. Did you notice that it's been getting bigger?
Himiko shook her head.
Well, I looked at some pictures to check, and it's definitely bigger now. I wonder if this is like teething pain. Izuku held up a small container. I'm going to put this ointment around it.
I used this all the time to help with my sore muscles when I was training for UA. Hopefully it'll help.
Himiko nodded.
Okay. I'll give that detective a call and see if he can't get a schedule to see the pediatrician they have for her case in the morning. That sounded like a good idea to Izuku. Hopefully the doctor would figure out what was going on and get Eri something to help. Both of them were soon back in his bedroom, with Himiko holding Eri, trying to soothe the little girl, while Izuku, as carefully as he could, rubbed the ointment into the skin around the horn. When that seemed to help take the edge off, Himiko left to get some Tylenol to make sure the pain didn't come back until she got Eri to a doctor for a checkup. Walking into class that morning, there was a haze of nervous excitement. Normally people would be chatting with their friends before the bell rang, but today everyone just went to their seats, too focused on the last test of the term. When Aizawa walked in, he seemed to approve of the class's temperament and got straight to the point. Everyone, he pressed a button on a small remote so that the wall containing their costume cases opened up. Change into your costumes and report to the central plaza. That is where you all will be taking your tests. Toga, he turned to address Himiko, you need to go to the development studio. Your costume has been finished. Himiko clapped happily. I will meet you all at the central plaza. Don't keep me waiting. So? What do you think? Himiko asked as she twirled around for the class. She had caught up with the rest of her classmates after changing into her new costume. To say that it was different than her last one would be an understatement. Gone were the sharp blades, tattered mask, huge syringes and major serial killer vibes, replaced with a clean and perhaps Victorian dapper look. She had tall black boots that were topped with a thick cuff around her thigh just past the knee. Past that, she had tight red leggings that were covered by a pleated short white skirt, hiding black twin thigh pouches. She had a black Victorian jacket with twin columns of gold buttons running up her chest, stopping at a white collared shirt, trimmed in red. A white ruffled ascot dangled around her neck and twin gold epaulets topped each of her shoulders, with thick tassels hanging down from them. A gold chain ran from one shoulder and connected to one of the top buttons. The jacket sleeves ended with a heavy cuff that was also trimmed in red. The white lace frills from her shirt peeked just past the cuffs. Over the backs of each of her hands were layered polished metal that lay over the shirt and continued up into her jacket sleeves. Hanging over Himiko's neck and shoulders was her old muffler, hiding a two-blind mask, though now the teeth had been stylized into thick jagged fangs. The class clapped at the new look. Very, very nice. You're all fancy. You look like a soldier from a shoujo. Now you only sorta look like a crazed serial killer. Oi! Denki winced as Rikadu thumped him on the head. You're not supposed to say that. Himiko chuckled. I mean, he's not wrong. My old costume was totally designed to copy Mr. Stain. So not the most
family-friendly look. Hanta shook his head. No kidding. I guess if you lived with the guy it makes sense, but, man, I thought I was gonna get sliced up any time I walked near you when you were wearing it. There's a reason I told those weirdos in the Department of Support to give me something less scary. Hitoshi, Izuku and Ochako all recalled the day they were with Himiko when she was trying on different trial costumes the support students had brought her. Himiko could read their minds and pointed at them. Not a word out of any of you. Tsuyu tapped her chin as she looked Himiko over. Aren't you underarmed now? Before, you had all sorts of knives and daggers, Karo. Izuku nodded. And what about your quirk? You had those syringes with you so you could collect blood, right? An excellent point. If Tenya wasn't wearing his helmet, he'd be adjusting his glasses as he talked. To give off a more friendly and welcoming appearance is all well and good, but you shouldn't sacrifice utili. Himiko raised her hand and with a flick, snicked, 2 long claw blades popped out from the metal bracer she was wearing under her coat. I got the same on my other hand. I liked my original claws, but making them retractable is more convenient. Plus, Himiko pulled up her black coat sleeve to show off the full bracer wrapped around her forearm over the white shirt. Everyone looked and saw that there were smaller claws folded along the sides. I can make it even nastier if I want with these. Only issue is that it'll tear through my coat sleeve. Popping the claws back and pulling the sleeve down, Himiko reached down and slipped her fingers under her white skirt. She pulled out a throwing dagger from the pouch at her leg. Still got these. Then reaching behind herself, she pulled out 2 of her syringes from under the back of her coat. And I got my little bloodsuckers. The coat covers the whole setup. Finally Himiko opened her coat, showing off a black vest and the coat's red satin lining. The coat was also lined with several large combat knives, switchblades, butterfly knives, and some gravity knives, just to round everything out. Any worries that Himiko was less armed than before were now quickly ended. So you're still Princess Stabity, then? Kyuka asked. Himiko paused while buttoning up her coat. I'm going to kill that balding DJ for giving me that name. Balding? Have you seen his hairline? When the class arrived at the central plaza, they found Aizawa waiting for them in front of the entrance. Good, you're all here. Now, we will begin the practical exam. Of course, this is no different than your written exam. It is possible to fail. So if you want to go the training camp this summer, then don't make any stupid mistakes here. Aizawa looked at his students and saw that they were taking the situation seriously. Nodding in approval, he moved on. I expect that you all gathered some information ahead of time and have some idea of what you will be doing. There was something in Aizawa's voice that the students picked up on. Something that made them uneasy. Momo raised her hand. Were we not supposed to inquire as to what our test might be? It would be the exact opposite in fact, Aizawa stated. If you hadn't taken any initiative to figure anything out, I would have to fail you on principle. Some of the students laughed nervously. Aizawa clarified, gathering information is just as important as anything else you'll do as a hero. Don't forget that. Denki, thinking everyone was in the clear, smirked confidently. It's robots, right? Like the entrance exam. Compared to last time, I can't wait for a chance to wreck the things. Nina cheered happily. That camping trip is in the bag. Oh, I'm afraid that for various reasons, the exam will be quite different now, a new voice shot down Denki and Mina, while Himiko groaned, recognizing the voice instantly. Nizu popped out from Aizawa's binding cloth and waved at the students. Oh, this won't be good, Himiko stated with certainty. Izuku frowned. Why does different sound bad for us? Climbing off Aizawa's shoulder and touching down on ground, Nizu continued, given recent events, we've decided to focus on person-to-person combat and hero work. This is to stress teachings that are closer to actual fighting. So, we'll have you form teams of 2 and fight. Wait, like we did during All Might's first lesson? Does that mean we're fighting each other? So half of us are going to fail? Nizu shook a paw. No. You won't be fighting each other. We want each team to have a chance at passing. Having half of you fail would look pretty sketchy to education boards. Himiko frowned, then looked over at Aizawa. Wait, against him, then?
A few recalled how Aizawa fought during the USJ attack, seeing him wrap up villains and slamming them into each other or the ground.
No one was really looking forward to that. Katsuki, hearing the nervous murmur, rolled his eyes and growled, "You're all fucking cowards. Just go for his eyes and you win." Ochako turned and stared at Katsuki blankly. Seriously, do you realize you don't sound like a hero at all? Nizu just laughed. Oh no, not against just Aizawa. That got him a few looks. Nizu then clapped his paws and the doors to the plaza opened up. Our teaching staff is here to help. So you see, it'll be a 2-on-1 fight against us. As Nizu talked, several UA teachers came out to stand beside Aizawa, but they weren't alone. But with classes all the way up to third years taking the same exam, we realized we needed some extra help, so we got some volunteers to join us. Midnight, Ectoplasm, Cementos and Snipe stood on one side, while the volunteers stood on the other. MT Lady, Gang Orca, Ryukyu, and Gunhead. Minoru had his hands on his head, looking absolutely crushed. We're doomed. Ochako, startled to see her old teacher, smiled brightly and waved. Gunhead Sensei. Gunhead waved back happily. Aizawa continued on with the explanation. Who you will be teamed up with and who you will be facing has already been decided. Everything was determined at my discretion based on various factors. Things like fighting styles, grades, and your personal relationships. The teams are as follows. Aizawa had a device similar to one back at the start of school. A holographic display was projected with the teams and who they would be facing. Aizawa sighed, rubbing his brow as he sat down. Tell me again why we're having this important meeting here.
Midnight rolled her eyes as she took her seat and immediately started looking over the drink menu.
Because if I'm going to have to listen to you drone on in a meeting, I want a drink in my hand.
Some of the other teachers all chuckled at that as they were joined by the rest of the hero volunteers that would help with the practical tests for Class 1A. Ryukyu smiled happily as she was handed a menu. I've heard of Stan's place, but have never had a chance to go. They're supposed to be the best hero bar in the country.
Gunhead winced.
Maybe, but did you see the price for water?
MT Lady winced.
700 yens for a glass of water?
All Might laughed.
An old joke from back when the bar was first founded in the States.
Back then, heroes weren't known to drink publicly.
So when Stan opened the bar and found out that most of his patrons weren't drinking, he had to find a way to make some money.
Hence, the water price.
Well, thank goodness I don't plan on skipping on the booze.
Waiter.
MT Lady waved over a server.
She squinted at the name tag.
Lance, a mug of Asahi Super Dry.
Make it a big one.
The blonde waiter, who looked like he belonged at a beach in California, wrote down the order.
Cool. More orders were taken, though Aizawa seemed less than thrilled when Nizu opened a tab and told everyone to drink what they wanted. It would help if everyone is sober for this.
Then perhaps we should get started before the first drinks arrive, Ectoplasm offered. Not a bad idea, Snipe agreed, even though he had ordered some top-shelf whiskey for himself.
Nizu turned to address the table.
Then let me start by offering my thanks to the volunteers who have agreed to help us with these term finals.
MT Lady, Gunhead, Gang Orca, Ryukyu. You all answered the call, and for that I am grateful.
The heroes waved him off or respectfully nodded their heads as they accepted the gratitude.
Gunhead rubbed his chin. I admit I'm curious exactly what you plan on using us for.
Your request for help with the students was on the vague side.
Nizu nodded.
The issue is that we wanted to keep our plans close to the chest, you could say. Give our PR team some breathing room.
That's ominous, MT Lady observed. This is an issue I've given a lot of thought to. But certain events have forced our hand, so to speak.
With the connection between Hero Killer, Stain and the League of Villains, there was the fear that the villains in the country would be reinvigorated. I'm sure you all have received similar reports from the Hero Public Safety Commission. The heroes all nodded.
Gang Orca spoke up. We've been encouraged to try and nip the issue in the bud before it actually becomes an issue. Nizu agreed.
That makes perfect sense, but there is the possibility it will happen regardless.
As a school, we think it best to prepare the students for this situation.
If we consider how fights against villains will continue to intensify, using the recent incidents as examples, then Yue's previous exam style of fighting robots is no longer going to cut it.
We used the robots as stand-ins because we wanted to avoid the issue of students getting hurt in the entrance exam, Midnight explained.
Parents and welfare groups were adamant that there was never to be a real danger to the students. But mock battles against machines are not reflective of the threat now, so we've decided that the students, starting now, will face living opponents in their term finals.
Us.
This is why we asked for so many volunteers.
Testing 6 different classes is a tall order for just the teachers. MT Lady whistled. Oh, those welfare people are going to love this.
At this point, we should ignore those people.
Let them cry if they want, Aizawa stated simply.
Which got a few frowns from the heroes and staff.
Midnight rubbed her brow.
Just so we're clear, while we want to get our students ready for the future, we are well aware they are still minors.
We aren't just going to ignore their well-being and the concerns of their parents. We're just going to ask for forgiveness rather than permission. After we have the kids take these new exams, Snike chuckled.
Gunhead tapped his fingers together. I can understand the logic, but at the same time, there's expecting greatness and then there's punishing normality. You're putting these kids, especially these first years, in a hell of a situation.
We've thought about that. The children will be in teams of 2 and of course we will all have handicaps.
This should ensure they have a fighting chance, Nizu explained.
Present Mike nodded. I'd hate to have to figure out a grade if we trounce them too quickly. All Might chuckled. Or deal with an angry parent. Midnight smirked, but All Might ignored her. Nizu looked at everyone.
This plan is to help make sure the students avoid greater danger down the line. This first obstacle may be unfair in many ways, but it'll help them in the long run.
This will make them stronger.
Even if they fail, this will help them grow because they will have the chance to learn from their mistakes. The explanation seemed to settle the worries everyone had. With that settled, Aizawa pulled out a number of files, ready to get to work.
So I'm going to have Satu and Aoyama? I think I can see what you want here.
Cementos folded his hands together as he looked at the file he had been handed. These two, more than anyone else in the class, have very hard limits on how long and how often they can use their quirks.
Aizawa nodded. Correct.
Satu depends on the amount of sugar he ingests, and there is the drawback that if he eats too much, he'll suffer from hyperglycemia.
He'll become too impaired to continue his fight.
But if he eats too little, his time will run out, and he'll lose his enhanced strength. All Might rubbed his chin.
Ah, and then there is young Aoyama.
There have been some, close calls in some lessons when he uses his quirk too much.
Semitas nodded. Then I suppose the plan for me is simple.
You are to draw out the match, force them to use their quirks. In order to win, these two must retreat when it becomes apparent they cannot overpower you.
Aizawa frowned when he glanced over at Nde Lady and Midnight glaring daggers at each other. Could you two not?
Midnight huffed and raised her hand, ordering another drink.
Why is she here again?
Nde Lady eyed Midnight from over the frothy rim of her mug as she chugged down some beer.
Apparently because you're not able to teach your own students.
The hell did you just say?
I mean, it makes sense.
Someone your age, they need all the help they can get. Before the two could rip the place apart, the beer mug was taken out of the lady's hand and replaced with a folder. If you would please pay attention before you get plastered, Aizawa groaned.
These will be the students you'll face.
Distracted away from Midnight, Nde Lady lazily flipped through the folder.
Hagakure and Ojiro. Don't recognize the names, really. Who are they? Midnight grumbled. Read the damned file. Yeah. MT Lady flipped through everything without a care, more concerned about her next drink. Let's see. Invisibility and tail? Tail as in. Ojiro has a tail. Pretty big one in fact. And he's a very decent martial artist for his age, Snipe filled in. That's it? MT Lady didn't seem all that impressed. No offense but, shouldn't these two be paired up with someone more? She waved her hands in a nondescriptive manner, higher on the food chain. Put together, they don't really have much punch. Especially when you have kids that can make icebergs, or are walking nukes. There was a twitch in Aizawa's eye. If you want to call them average, you wouldn't be wrong. Neither have the gifts some of their classmates have. Which is why I'm having them face you. MT Lady shrugged. Two average kids versus my giant self, huh? Well, I guess the girl will be able to make a quick escape. I can just go all kaiju and wreck the area away from the exit. You're to make sure they can't escape. MT Lady let her head fall to the side. I'm sorry, what? Do you want them to beat me? Correct. Instead of the normal cuffs, both will be given magnetic plates that they have to attach to the weights you'll be wearing on your wrists. Present Mike chimed in, we got the crane to lift them, right? Nizu gave a paw thumbs up. MT Lady held up her hands. Hold on. I'm 67 feet tall when I'm using my quirk. You expect them to win when I'm a freaking giant? You'll find instructions on how you'll be fighting and acting in the file Iowa started, but M'lady cut him off. I'm a giant. How do you expect two kids to beat me in any conceivable way? I'm going to have to let them win. Which kinda defeats the point of this whole exam, right? Little kids with basic quirks like this can't be someone like me. Aizawa leaned forward. I did, when I was still a student. Present Mike winced. Garvey. Toga goes to me, Midnight cut in as Aizawa was about to hand out another file. And I'll handle her exam my own way. Aizawa kept the folder in his hand. I can accept that, as long as I approve who you intend to pair her up with. I have a list for you to choose from that you can. Ajui, Midnight stated. Aizawa blinked before nodding. She was on the list. So it's fine. Midnight poured herself another glass from her bottle. Good. Principal, how are the modifications to the USJ zone? Nizu smiled. Proceeding in record time. Everything will be ready. Ida and Shinso. These two, Aizawa paused when he noticed that all the other teachers had stopped drinking and were looking at him. The sudden undivided attention made him raise an eyebrow. What? Present Mike waved him on, no, continue. Present Mike just smiled. Which just made the whole thing seem even more suspicious. Why are you even here? You're with the group working with 1B. Present Mike just waved him off. They're meeting later. And do you think I would miss a chance to see you pass out after one sip of your drink? Aizawa glanced down at his untouched drink. You're exaggerating. Aha. Back to the subjects at hand. Ida and Shinso. I'll be the one they'll face in the test. Midnight and Present Mike cheered. Pay up, suckers. The other teachers all grumbled and began fishing out their wallets. Ida, Ryukyu said as she watched money change hands. I've worked with his brother before. Everything I've heard says he's living up to the family name. So why did you pick him as the partner? She smirked. The way I hear it, having you for the test could be seen as a harsh punishment. All Might paused as he was about to hand off his money to Midnight, who was also giving Aizawa a sideways look. Aizawa, however, cut off any potential ideas on the subject. Ida is an exemplary student. Any mistakes he's made in the past have been quickly dealt with. I picked him because I intend to expose a flaw in the way he fights. Oh? He overly relies on his quirk.
Everything he does, how he views situations, how he reacts, and his fighting style, all center around it. I intend to erase his quirk and see how he responds.
Nothing more, nothing less. I'd like for you to take Uraraka.
Given that you spent some time with her, I think you'd be able to determine how she's improved. Aizawa paused for a second as he handed Gunhead a file to look over, Ochako's student file, and if there are any bad habits she may have picked up.
Miruko? Miruko. Gunhead nodded. I appreciate the opportunity then.
When she was with me, Uraraka soaked up everything I taught her like a sponge. I do want to see what else she's absorbed since she left.
Good and ill alike. Gunhead then flipped over to the next student. As for this young man, any reason in particular you've teamed him up with her?
In regards to yourself, there is not a strong connection. There is with Uraraka, however.
Though I admit any of my female students would have worked.
Oh? There is some friction between him and the rest of the female body.
Friction? Midnight poured herself another drink. He's a horn dog. Ah. Has he done anything? Nizu shook his head.
Not directly, and apparently the issue has been settled internally between himself, the young ladies in his class and the class as a whole. He still has antics they find annoying, and he has a wandering eye, but aside from that he hasn't done anything egregious. So, you're making Uraraka work with someone she isn't on great terms with then, Gunhead confirmed.
Correct, but this is also to test if Mineta can act in a reasonable manner while under duress, with someone of the opposite sex.
Aizawa shuffled through some more papers. Ectoplasm, the other teacher looked over at him while he nursed a small whiskey. I would like you to take Yaoyorozu and Jairu.
Handing him the file, Ectoplasm looked over the contents.
Even wearing his mask, the others could see him raise an eyebrow as he looked everything over.
You want me to take them to the mountain zone at the USJ? Correct.
A few of the teachers frowned as they tried to follow where Aizawa was leading, before President Mike hissed.
Oh, hold on. That's cruel.
MT lady tilted her head to the side.
Wait. What am I missing here? Ectoplasm put the folder down.
During the villain attack, Jairu and Yaoyorozu had to defend themselves against multiple villains in the mountain zone.
It seems he wants to repeat that incident for their exam. MT lady popped a fist into her palm. Oh. Gotcha, damn, that is cruel. Does UA make it a point to force kids to relive traumatic events, or is it just a you thing, Eraserhead? Gang Orca grunted, if these children are going to get stronger, they can't let something like Midnight cut in. Hold on. These are children, and you want to make them relive that attack?
Snipe swirled his glass.
If I recall, weren't you one of the first ones that gave her blessing to have the class watch the security footage of the attack?
There's a difference between watching footage to study, and getting thrown into the same situation, Midnight countered.
Nizu raised his paws. Now.
I'm sure Aizawa has his reasons.
He's had them for everyone else. Aizawa nodded.
After the class's internships, I was given reports from all the heroes that my students trained under. Well, almost all of them. All Might laughed nervously, and the one from Fat Gum, who oversaw Yaoyorozu's training, had some interesting notes. She saw her previous actions during the attack as flawed and unnecessarily dangerous. He summed up by saying she is brilliant but inexperienced. So you want to give her a chance at a do-over, now that she has experience, to see if she handles herself better?
Correct. And Jairu?
When their recording was shown, she herself stated she wished she had been able to do more. This is a unique chance for the two to show that they've improved since that day.
Anything in particular I should know about these two, than what's in here?
Ryukyu asked as she was handed her file.
Ashido and Kirishima went to the same school before coming to UA.
They have a familiarity with each other. I'm putting them together since they should work well together.
Should?
They are both outgoing students, but I think they'll come up with two separate paths to pass.
Escaping or defeating me. Correct. They should come to an agreement and stick to the plan. present Mike scoffed with a smirk. Right, because good friends don't argue any more than acquaintances. Exactly, Aizawa said. Tokoyami has the potential to have one of the highest combat potential quirks in the class. Dark Shadow has untapped power that Tokoyami hasn't had a chance to bring to the forefront. Gang Orca nodded as Aizawa spoke. Had a chance to, or is he holding himself back? Potentially both. He needs a chance to cut loose, and I need to see how he handles himself when he's up against someone that can take it. Trial by fire then. Some of the heroes didn't like the almost wicked look on Gang Orca's face. Should be easy enough. Though, his eyes then moved to the other student listed, and his picture, this boy here. Doesn't seem like he has the same problem. He does not, Aizawa stated. Kuda is a different situation entirely. Midnight lifted her head off the table and pointed at Aizawa. Don't you go trying to turn that sweet boy into some hardened fighter. We have enough battle-hardened heroes, thank you very much. World could use some kind heroes, someone that little kids won't be scared of. Gang Orca pulled at his collar. As the third-ranked hero to pass as a villain, he had caused more than a few problems in the past when he was out in public. Plus, Snipe added while he finished off his whiskey, the boy isn't a fighter to begin with. Search and rescue, and perhaps covert ops with his animals. That's where he shines. Gang Orca looked back at Kuji's file. Ah. So he can communicate with and order animals he talks to. You're right, Snipe. There are many fields this boy could excel in outside of combat. I don't disagree, however, Aizawa scratched at the scars under his eyes. During the USJ attack, 13 was left in critical condition. While she made a name for herself as an excellent rescue hero, her lack of experience in combat almost got herself killed. That's a good point, Gang Orca agreed. If a bit hypocritical, MT Lady added as she got another refill. A hero that jumps into a situation they aren't properly trained for or experienced with could cause more issues. Correct, Aizawa agreed. But you're looking at it from the end point. Right now the students are still learning. It's true Kuda's field may be outside combat, but that doesn't mean he shouldn't be getting experience now. So, MT Lady mumbled out past her mug. You haven't mentioned Endeavor's kid yet. She glanced over at All Might and winked at him. Maybe you're giving him to All Might. I'm sure his father would just love that. All Might laughed nervously. He was sure Aizawa didn't hate him enough to do that. Right? Todoroki will be dealing with me this time, Snipe cut in. Aizawa briefed me early on with some of his ideas. So I've had some time to get ready for the kid. MT Lady snickered into her beer, adding more foam to the head. A guy with a gun against someone that can make giant glaciers. Yeah, okay. The kid is strong, ain't no arguing that, but all that power won't do much if he can't hit me. Ryukyu sipped on her sake. If I remember it right, you gave an interview where you bragged about how you could hit targets almost 600 meters away. I'd imagine even with all the power that young man has, he doesn't have that kind of range. So what? You're gonna play hide and seek with the kid? Exactly. Todoroki does not have a quirk that lends itself to searching for a hidden opponent. But, his partner does, Aizawa explained. Todoroki will be teamed up with Shuji, who ultimately will be the key in the two of them passing this test. Nizu poured himself a cup of tea. There's almost an unwritten rule that when heroes team up on the fly, the stronger of the two takes command of the situation. Generally, this makes sense as the stronger one usually has more experience given his strength. He sipped his freshly poured tea. But this is only generally. Sometimes, situations require the opposite to be true. And those powerful heroes that are used to being the one giving orders find themselves with a choice. Aizawa nodded. How often do you think they make the right one? Principal, sir. Aizawa handed Nizu a file, which the mousy bear took with glee. Oh boy, let's see who I get to torture. The glee in Nizu's voice made all the non-teacher heroes at the bar turn to look at him. Don't you mean teach?
Ryukyu asked, not at all liking how all the teachers seemed to let the words go by without blinking an eye.
Oh, I know what I said, Nizu said with a smile. Would you look at that? Kaminari and Shiro. Yes. I can have a lot of fun with these two. Midnight chuckled, shaking her head. Don't be too mean. Me? Never. Was the collective response from the teachers while the other heroes just looked around, feeling like they were missing something. Gang Orca leaned over to look at the pair. I think I recall these two from the sports festival. One has some kind of electrical quirk and the other, he could shoot tape from his hands? Elbows in fact, Nizu corrected. Gang Orca rubbed his chin. The two work well in different fields. Shiro with his tape has the advantage of high mobility and capture. Kaminari's quirk gives him good area of effect coverage. However, his electricity can't distinguish between friend or foe. In fact, if he's not careful he can overload himself and leave himself in a dazed state. Gun had thought about that. So their quirks could hinder themselves if they try to work together. Shiro can't get close to Kaminari in a fight, either to assist or rescue, if things get dicey. They also both have the habit of acting as hotheads and show a great deal of immaturity, Aizawa added. They'll both have to act against their type against the principal. Nizu cackled. My genius is their natural enemy. Present Mike sighed. So we're totally getting sued by their parents after this. Aizawa brought out the last folder, though before he said anything, All Might beat into it. Hold on a moment, Eraser. All Might was frowning. I think we have a problem. No, we don't. Aizawa handed All Might the folder. We may have agreed that you would be allowed to give Midoriya his final test to gauge his progress and to make sure his habits had been nipped in the bud, but everything else is still left to my discretion. And there are other issues that need to be addressed. All Might opened the folder and confirmed what he already knew. Young Midoriya and young Bakugou. If I recall, I've heard you say a few times that their rivalry is something positive. A sign of growth. I have, and I do believe that. But, it's still young. Which is exactly why I'm going to have it stress tested. I'm not blind, All Might, there is a deep and long history between these two. A troubled history. Aizawa tapped his fingers on the table. Officially, there are no reported incidents between the two. School records paint Bakugou as a model student. The teachers all chuckled darkly at that. But you only had to watch those two for a day to pick up on the issues between them. I will grant that after the sports festival, the two of them have come to a tentative truce. It shows maturity on both sides that they were able to do this, I won't disregard that. In fact, by teaming them up, I'm acknowledging their growth, while also acknowledging that the two still have issues that need to be addressed. All Might sighed, knowing that Aizawa had a good point. All Might, because of what happened in Hoso City, you decided to personally take responsibility for Midoriya's growth since then, to make sure he would be able to continue his studies past this term final. However, don't let that personal work make you forget that you have many students you are responsible for. This term final isn't just for Midoriya. Bakugou must also be tested. And being forced to pair up with someone he doesn't get along with to see if he is able to work together with him to achieve victory is an important lesson. Just as important as what you've been doing for Midoriya. All Might knew Aizawa was right. Because he had so many responsibilities towards Izuku, and had had the chance to work with him personally again, it had been easy to forget that there were others here that needed his attention. He had seen the rivalry as good for Izuku, a chance to move on from old wounds and grow in new ways. But looking back, All Might never truly stopped to think about how this rivalry would work from Katsuki's perspective. The boy had already challenged Izuku once when he assumed the other had been slacking, which the two of them seemed fine with. Butting heads made them both work harder. But while Izuku had the lead, Katsuki was working tirelessly to not just close the gap but to surpass it. Could Katsuki swallow his pride and work with the person he was trying to surpass? It was a fair question, and this term final was the perfect opportunity to check that. Aizawa was right, he was Katsuki's teacher too. And he had a responsibility to have the question answered. A rival was all well and good, but only so long as it didn't get in the way of getting their job done as a hero. Because that, above all else, was the most important thing. Sato-Rikido and Aoyama Yuga vs Cementos. Hagakure Toru and Ojiro Mashireo vs MT Lady. Toba Himiko and Azui Tsuyu vs Midnight. Shinso Hitoshi and Ida Tenya vs Eraserhead. Uraraka Ochako and Mineta Minoru vs Gunhead. Jiro Kyuka and Yayorozu Momo vs Ectoplasm. Kirishima Ijiru and Ashido Mina vs Ryukyu. Kudakuji and Tokoyami Fumikage vs Gang Orca. Todoroki Shuto and Shuji Mezu vs Snipe. Kaminari Denki and Shiro Hanta vs Principal Nizu. Midoriya Izuku and Bakugou Katsuki vs All Might. Koji looked like he was ready to faint. Kyuka was trying to comfort him, but when she glanced over at Gang Orca, she almost let slip a "You're doomed." More and more students seemed to become uneasy as they looked over who they were going to have to fight. Even some of the more brash students had a slight quake in their voices as they tried to reassure and pump everyone up. Izuku wasn't really sure what he was more nervous about: facing All Might in a match or teaming up with his partner. A shiver ran up his spine, making Izuku look to the side, only to find Katsuki glaring at him. Okay, it's the latter. Ochako was dealing with several emotions. Dread and excitement to get to face her old sensei. She had come a long way since that month of training. Annoyance and disappointment that she wasn't teamed up with Izuku this time but with Minoru. And finally, an unhealthy hatred, because Izuku was teamed up with the worst possible person he could be with. If Bakugou fucks this up for Deku, I'm killing him. Himiko was humming a little song. I'm gonna stab Midnight. I'm gonna stab Midnight today. I'm gonna stab Midnight today, and totally get an A. Midnight felt her eyebrow twitch. While the class was still absorbing everything, Momo raised her hand. Aizawa-sensei. Is this even a test we can pass? It seems like at best, we can only hope to not fail too quickly. Katsuki growled. Don't lump me in with the rest of you losers. Dude, you're up against All Might. You're screwed. I'll strangle you with your own tape. Nizu raised his paws, getting the class's attention. Now. A test where you can only fail wouldn't be much of a test. You'll each have a chance to succeed. Now, I think it's time to go over the rules for your test. Aizawa held out a pair of handcuffs. To win, you either put these handcuffs on your opponent, or have one of you escape from the arena before the 30-minute timer runs out. Mina frowned. Wait? Is it really okay to just run away? That doesn't seem very heroic. Aizawa nodded. Yes, sometimes a tactical retreat is the best option. Fumikage turned to Mina. Recall how we chose to escape during the villain attack. Oh, good point. Denki laughed nervously. Come on. It's not like they're going to go all out on us. It'll be fine. Gang Orca huffed. Don't think this is just regular combat training. We dwarf you in every considerable way. This will be more like a life or death battle. That got a few eeps from the class. Today we are not heroes or teachers, we are villains. The monsters that want to kill you. Any bravado the class might have had instantly evaporated because of the harsh words and harsher glare from Gang Orca. Koji was visibly shaking, with other students joining Kyuka to help soothe the poor boy. If you think you can win, then try and win, but if the difference in power is too great, run, Aizawa continued. Run and get help. Sometimes that is the best thing you can do. Aizawa made a point to look Izuku, Ochako, Tenya, Shudo and Himiko in the eye when he said that. The message was clear: this is what they should have done back in Hosa City. Ochako and Shudo traded glances, both thinking they should have told Endeavor what they were running into back when they got Izuku's text. All Might stepped forward. You're being tested over more than just your combat ability. Your decision-making skills will also be tested today. Run or fight, you'll have to decide what you want to do, and how you want to do it, as a team. All Might made sure to look at both Izuku and Katsuki. Because either way, you won't pass if you don't work together. Izuku gulped while Katsuki grumbled under his breath. Now, given the two choices and such a small time limit, I'm sure most of you are thinking that escape might be your only option. If you think we'd let you escape, Lady smiled sweetly. Turo clutched Mashireo's arm as they both felt a shiver of fear run up their spines. It was almost enough to make Mashireo not notice that he effectively had a naked girl hanging onto him. Soft. Well, don't worry, All Might continued. We had the support students make us something special. All Might held up what looked like wrist or ankle weights. These are special weights that will slow us down by adding almost half our body weight. So as you can see, we're giving you all a handicap. He started to put on his weights. It's an old school method, but effective. These things make it hard to move and it just eats up our stamina. All Might put the last of the weights on, and grunted while trying not to show the rest of the class. Oh shit, they're heavier than I thought. Katsuki crossed his arms, a growl rumbling past his lips. You're going to regret underestimating me by going to such lengths to hold back. All Might laughed. That's the spirit. Ochako on the other hand looked ready to whack him upside the head. I swear, if his ego gets in Deku's way. Satu, Aoyama. Aizawa stepped in, ready to get the tests underway. You'll go with Cementos now to your stage. The rest of you can watch the exams from the plaza control room, or you can meet up with your teammates to discuss strategies. Just be ready when it's your time. As the heroes and teachers turned to leave, the rest of the students began to disperse too. Izuku turned to find Katsuki, but the other boy was already gone. Izuku sighed and scratched his head. Great. This is off to a spectacular start. So what did the doctor say? Izuku had his phone up to his ear as he walked the halls. He hummed as he heard the answer. Well, I'm glad he doesn't think it's serious and that she's feeling fine now. Okay, Mom, I have to get going now. Bye. Hanging up, Izuku breathed out a sigh of relief as he put his phone away into one of his pouches. Everything all right, Deku? Ochako had walked up beside him when he had gotten the phone call, since neither of them had teammates they could plan with at the moment. Minoru was still a little freaked out over everything, so Ochako was giving him some time to calm down, and Katsuki was being Katsuki, so no point there. So they decided to watch some of the matches together. Yeah. That was Mom, she and Eri just got done with their doctor visit. Is she alright? Ochako had been worried when she had gotten the update that morning. Izuku nodded. Yeah, the doctor says it's just growing pains, so he'll prescribe something when the soreness flares up again. She was feeling fine this morning, and when the doctor checked her, she didn't feel anything. That's good. I guess Eri's just a growing girl. Izuku agreed. Yeah. Izuku looked at Ochako for a second, making her fidget. Deku? Thinking about it, your bracers are bigger now too, aren't they? Ochako smirked as she stuck her hand and arm through the gear. The new bracers were bigger than her old ones. Fortunately, the added girth and length didn't affect things too much. She could still bend her arm easily enough. Power Loader sighed as he picked up the other bracer to hand it to her. As you can see, the weight of the things is a bit crazy. On top of the 4 firing mechanisms and the loaded-up ammo you had before, the new additions for the other 4 holes ended up weighing more than what was taken out. They had to make the darn things bigger to accommodate everything. Altogether, it makes the bracers unwieldy. We'll need to. Crack. Ochako had put the second bracer on and swung her arm out into the nearest dummy, smashing its head in. She then proceeded to punch the dummy repeatedly, cracking the impact plastic of the body. Flexing her arms as she tested the weight, she smiled. It was like having a couple of sledgehammers attached to her arms. Sorry, you were saying something, Sensei? Power Loader blinked. Wait? Ochako tilted her head to the side. What about weight?
It dawned on Power Loader that Ochako wasn't dealing with the added weight on her arms, she hardly noticed it. May snickered from her workbench.
Told you she was going to be fine with them. Power Loader shook his head, turning to May. Your generation is something else. It's a little. Snap. By the time Power Loader turned back around, Ochako was putting away the tool that had ripped the dummy in half.
May had a big smile on her face. They used a chunk of solid titanium for that.
You like?
The smile on Ochako's face made it pretty clear she did.
Ochako laughed before she took a step closer to Izuku, leaning over so she could give him a bit of a mischievous side eye. Deku, if I didn't know any better, I'd say you pay a lot of attention to me. Izuku gulped, turning a little red.
Seeing that blush, and the way Izuku's eyes were struggling to look anywhere but at her, Ochako suddenly understood why Himiko had so much fun flirting.
Oh, I could get used to this. Izuku stammered out, I have to keep my notebook updated. Oh? Ochako winked. Gotcha.
Izuku pulled at his collar before pulling out his notebook, and started writing down notes. They're pretty much the size of Kaken's now, but I don't think yours are hollow.
Nope. Only had my rubber bullets before. Now, Ochako gave her eyebrows a little wiggle, I got some new secrets to show off.
The rest of the stuff I wanted is still getting worked on, but these bad boys are ready to go.
Izuku gulped, the playful look Ochako had was so damned cute. Still, he soldiered on. So are they, heavier? Does it bother you? Ochako's mischievous smile turned just a tad cocky.
Standing up straight, Ochako moved her helmet from under one arm to the other, so she could use that arm to flex, letting the bicep bulge and stretch the skin-tight material of her costume.
What do you think?
Something between a squeak and a moan slipped past Izuku's lips when he answered.
And no. Izuku started muttering, thinking up just what Ochako could be hiding inside those things. Did she lose some of her ammo to make room? Did it have anything to do with those lessons she had been getting from Nijire? What did that bicep feel like? Would she let him touch it? How hard are her muscles?
Like her abs, or her thighs?
Deku. Izuku blinked, suddenly brought back to the real world.
He scratched the back of his head with a laugh.
Sorry. I went off on one of my fits again, didn't I? Then Izuku noticed something. Ochako wasn't flexing her arm anymore. Izuku almost let out a disappointed sigh.
Her hands were behind her back, and her shoulders were swaying. Her cheeks were much pinker, and she had a cute nervous smile as she looked off to the side.
She looked so bashful. Cute.
You know Deku, Ochako was still swaying her shoulders, but was now looking at him. Not directly, but her eyes were on him.
When all this is over, I wouldn't mind letting you find out what's hard, and what's still soft. There was a moment of silence before Izuku's head tilted to the side and he let out a confused, huh? Ochako blinked.
Not exactly the reaction she had been expecting. Then it dawned on her that Izuku hadn't realized what he had muttered out. So he didn't realize that she had just invited Izuku to feel her up after they. Shaking her head, Ochako pivoted.
Never mind. Just ignore that. Hey! The first match is about to start. Let's go find the control room and watch. Ochako rushed up, grabbed Izuku's wrist, and started pulling him along. Izuku laughed, happy that despite everything, they could still act like this, talk so openly.
I'll have my answer for you, Uraraka, Izuku whispered.
He wasn't really saying that to Ochako. Or to himself. More, just airing out a promise. Ochako paused briefly before she nodded.
She didn't trust herself to turn around and look at him, too worried that if she did, well, either she or him would become the bread of a make-out sandwich against the wall.
Or the ceiling. Or the floor. Honestly, any flat surface would do. Did this place have a broom closet? And that's enough of that. Ochako put a stop to those thoughts. This was not the time or place to let herself get swept away. Hey, Uraraka? Ochako almost screamed. Izuku had no idea how close she was to snapping and just. Do all the new toys you have anything to do with all those black eyes and busted noses you kept getting the past few weeks? Ochako tripped, gah, before she whirled around. We don't talk about that. Izuku just smugly smiled at her. It'd be super embarrassing if that happened and everyone saw it. Izuku then ducked as Ochako took a swing at him, scurrying away with a laugh while Ochako chased after him, fists raised to punish him. Skidding to a stop, Izuku fended off a few more swings from Ochako as he tried to reach for the control room's door. Before he could press it, the door slid open, making both him and Ochako jump back and separate. Recovery Girl eyed the two of them before shaking her head and muttering something about kids. Hello, Recovery Girl. We're, here to watch some of the matches. Recovery Girl pointed her thumb into the room. Go ahead. You enjoy it. I get the feeling I'm going to be extremely busy today. Ochako laughed. Oh, I'm sure it won't be that busy. Poof. Recovery Girl walked by them. Tell that to the poor souls I'm going to go treat now. Izuku and Ochako both blinked and glanced at each other. What do you Maya? The intercom crackled to life as Nizu's voice came through. Team Satu and Aoyama retires due to both members no longer being able to fight. Izuku's eyes went wide while Ochako gasped, wait, already? Rushing inside, they stared dumbfounded at a large screen that showed both Rikadu and Yuga lying on a street, with mountains of broken concrete all around them. Rikadu had passed out while Yuga was on his knees clutching his stomach. It was at the moment that the two were hit with just how hard this test was going to be. That will be it for this part. I hope everyone enjoyed. If you did, please leave a like and comment if you want part 47. If you want to hear more from me, subscribe. I hope to see you all in the next one.